What's going on, everybody? It's Rick from Gardening with Barchuckin. Today is the 52nd feeding, which is 1 year. I went ahead, I just did a count. I'm going to go ahead and show right now, put in a quick insert of when I flipped all the worms back in, and then I'll show you a time lapse at the end. This still had a little bit of watermelon and some of those asparagus pieces from the stem. So we'll kind of dig in, see if the worms are still kind of hanging out in this area. And then at the end, before I go ahead and show the time lapse, I'll go over where all the worms were. And there's that pumpkin stem that's going to be with us for a while. Here's that sweet potato. Maybe I'll see if I can rip it open a little bit so it makes it easier for the worms to get in there. When I was doing the counting, the shell of that watermelon, half a watermelon that I put in, was still there. Now it's just the skin, and there was a ton of worms in that section. So normally I like doing a nice mixing. Seeing that I went basically through this whole bin when I did the count, I'm not going to disturb them too much. I will go ahead and add them a bunch of bedding. And try to keep it in the bin. So I got a bunch of different stuff today. Had some arugula. And then I have some of the pulp from the blender. I doubt I'll be able to get into this bin by next week. So I'll give them a decent feeding now, and this should last them for 2 weeks. What I like to do is once I go ahead and put the feeding, I add the ground up eggshell right to the top. That's a grit for the worms. They don't have teeth like us, so they need something to help digest the food for them, and that grit will help break down in their crop and gizzard the food scraps that they end up consuming. Okay, we got a nice little mound going on right there. I like to add a little bit of worm chow to the top. It's just expired grain, expired oats, expired cornmeal, and a little bit of powdered eggshell for grit. While I got you here, I'm going to start running this bin just a little bit wetter. My buddy Brian, he had to start a new YouTube channel. He wasn't able to, I guess, get YouTube to reinstate the old one, so he started a new one. I'm going to add a card right here to his new channel. So if you were friends with Brian before, make sure you go back, subscribe again. He always suggested about running this bin just a little wetter because it does have the spout down at the bottom, and that's what I'm actually going to try for the next few months, possibly even up to a year. So you can see there's already castings coming through and a bunch of worms. So when I started the count, I removed everything. This had some moisture in the bottom, so I threw some bedding down here for the worms because it's probably going to get some water the way I'm going to start doing this bin now. There was 2 worms down here. On this white kind of, separator from the basin and the trays, there was 10 worms and a bunch more castings. So I just kind of wiped it down as best as I could. I didn't go super crazy cleaning it up. With the bottom inoculating tray, I'm making sure that the corners are where the feet are. So in this tray, which was the bottom inoculating tray, there was 19 worms. So not a lot, but that's the way I wanted it. I was trying to keep everything in the harvest and the feeding tray. But now I'm going to kind of run it a little wetter, see if that helps the worms out. It'll be a little experiment. In this lid, there's a coconut coir mat, and I ended up counting 46 worms, and then there was a bunch still weaved in the mat that I wasn't going ahead and disrupting. So there's basically more worms than my final count in here. Plus there was tons of borderline microscopic. I mean, they would actually fit in between the layers of the corrugated paper. It was crazy how tiny some of these worms were. Like, see there's little, spaces in there. They would actually be inside of that. So most of those worms, I didn't even bother. I was just, pushing the bedding aside and going for worms I could actually see, grab, and move around. The one that was underneath this is the feeding tray, was the pre-harvest tray. When I counted that up, there was 725 worms in there. And then once I jumped into this monstrosity, luckily I had put from the last feeding a large piece of watermelon. That collected a ton of worms, but there was still a god-awful amount. So when I counted that all up, there was 1,540 in this feeding tray. So the different sections, there was 2, 10, 19, 46, 725, and then 1,540, along with whatever was left in the coconut coir mat and the oodles of little microscopic ones. But the count that I got was 2,342 worms. So I could easily say with confidence there's over 2,500 worms in here. I did want to say thanks for Patrick at Vermicompost Learn by Doing. He's the one that inspired me to get this Vermihut Plus. To me, this is a pretty awesome system. It is a little pricey at like $99 or $104.95, but for me, it was well worth it. This was a great little experiment. This is a great bin. And like I said, I'm going to be going ahead and taking Brian's advice and actually putting just a little bit more water into this system and see how it goes. If it's something that I like, I'll keep doing it. If it's something that I start seeing or noticing any problems, I'll just back off the water again and run it the way I did this whole year, because this worked out perfectly fine. It did what I needed it to do. I don't know the exact amount of castings, but I believe that was my 3rd harvest. So I'm probably somewhere around 17 to 20 pounds out of this, and it only started with 350 worms, which is pretty cool. I hope you guys have followed the progress over this last year. Definitely, it's neat seeing when you go from having a lot of bedding to start seeing those castings develop, and then also noticing as you start moving your hand through the bin, seeing worms all throughout. It's pretty cool. Well, thanks for coming along, checking out the video. Everybody have a great day, and here's when I went ahead and placed the worms back into the bin. Check it out. So let me just say, I'm glad this is over. Don't think I'll ever do this one again, but it was neat to see. There was lots of little worms and quite a few pretty big worms. So I'm going to dump this out and see, do a little time lapse here and watch them head back under into the bedding. I definitely plan on doing a few new things this year with it. Like I said, I'll probably show it just a little bit less. It was a lot showing it every single week, especially with overtime and stuff like that with work. And we just had a guy retire, so I'm going to be definitely working more hours.